Oh, hello, I think we are live. So hello, rock and roll, Catherine, Susan, Tish, who else? Just going through the chat here. So yeah, I hope you're all well. It's good evening from Colchester from me. Claire, hello. Found a nice little spot for the pre-tour. And Lynn, hello. Elizabeth, hello. Another beautiful day in Colchester, it is. Yeah, I hope you're all having a great Saturday. This duck's just chilling here on the river. And Diane, hello from Florida. Filthy Vegan, hello. Reflections indeed, yeah. Nice sort of waterside spot. And, yeah. Very pleasant evening here in Colchester. Hope it's nice where you all are. Ah, Shaquille, hello. Yeah, not a bad house to live in that, I'd have thought. It's nice in Devon today, ah, good to hear. So yeah, for anyone wondering, we'll start the tour at 7:30 UK time, so about 5 minutes from now. In the meantime, you can savour these views here. Oh yeah, I'm sure it's a haunted house. Sure there's a few ghosts lingering there. It's my house and my garden. Well, it'd be nice. Maybe it's one of those where if you can stay the night, you'll inherit the fortune. That old trope. Haunted by the happy previous owners, yeah. Yeah, you might not think it to look at it now, but this is a city, and this is the city of Colchester. Even though we've got this lovely green spot here that we've found for the pre-tour. Ah, Shaquille, yeah, I brought my microphone, but I forgot to bring the little thing that adapts it into the Samsung phone, so that's my mistake there. I'll remember to bring it next time. It's raining there, but the birds are chirping. Good background sound for the live stream. There we go. It's almost time to start, so I should best make a move. You can probably see by the sun that it's one of those days where if you point the camera straight at the sun, you'll have a few issues, but if you point the camera away from the sun, it'll be quite beautiful. I could almost do a tour just from this park alone. Anyway, I think it's time for me to start officially, so welcome to Colchester. And my name is Alex, aka 4K Explorer, so you might know me from the immersive 4K walking tour videos that I do. And I've recently branched out into live streaming walking tours like this one. It's something I've actually been doing for about 9 or 10 months. Previously via another platform called heygo.com, which sadly closed about a month back. But I've brought the live streams onto to YouTube. So just to let you know a couple of things. This is of course a free walking tour. If you do want to support the channel, you can. There's a super chat option where there's a rectangle with a $ just below the chat box. If you want to explore that, but that's not obligatory, of course. There's also a PayPal link if that's of interest as well. And I should say a huge thanks for those who did donate to me last weekend as well. I do appreciate that helps me to carry on these little live adventures. And also, if you're interested in taking any screenshots, there's some details on the description below of this video. There is an extension called Screenshots YouTube, where you can take as many screenshots as you want. It goes into the downloads folder. Or there's also, I believe, an app called Screenshots Touch, if that's of interest. And then, of course, you are welcome to share any screenshots on social media, Facebook and so forth. But with that all said, I'll just flip the camera back around and say welcome to Colchester, and it's a case of where to begin, really. And hello Mark, by the way, have I missed anyone? And Susan, by the way, hello. And yeah, also just a quick note, I've uploaded a video on my sister channel. You can watch that in your own time if that's of interest. It's about Oxford Street. In the meantime, so we are, as I say, in this city of Colchester, and I do mean a city because it was granted city status just last year as part of our late Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. There were a number of towns that were upgraded to cities. So in mainland Britain there was Colchester, Doncaster, Milton Keynes, Dunfermline and Wrexham, and then there's also Bangor in Northern Ireland, was Douglas in the Isle of Man, and Stanley in the Falklands, and they're all cities now. Oh, thank you Elizabeth. Right, mate. So I'll just see if we've missed anything on the chat there. Oh, thanks Susan. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, here's a nice little view, a couple of 17th century buildings to get things going. I'll see if I can get the reflections in as well. So yeah, on the YouTube front, it's still a case of sort of feeling my way around and seeing what might work in terms of the sister channel videos, keeping a close eye on the analytics. But for now, I thought I'd just linger on this shot for a little while. Like I say, these are from the 17th century, these houses. We're on the North Bridge, by the way, over the River Colne, C-O-L-N-E. But yeah, let's just give you a few more seconds and let's move on. So anyway, so as I say, I've titled this tour Britain's Oldest and Newest City, newest of course being joint newest with the other ones mentioned as part of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and it is of course what some would call the oldest city as well, in reference to its Roman past. So the story goes that in the year 43 AD, the Roman invasion occurred under Emperor Claudius, and they established a legionary base here during that same decade, and then the Roman frontier advanced, and then this became a colonia, which is the ancient Roman equivalent of a town or a city as we think of it today. And this became the first capital of Roman Britain, and it had a population of about 30,000 at its sort of a peak, which was huge by the standards of the first century AD. And then there was the most famous building of Roman Britain was the Temple of Claudius, which was here in Colchester, and we'll see the site where that was, because that is now, well, it then became the castle. I'll explain that as we go. And the name, of course, of the Roman settlement here was Camulodunum, which I also mentioned in my YouTube video that I did on the sister channel. So Camulodunum comes from the Celtic god Camulus, which was a god of war, which was quite foreshadowing because the Celts did have a little bit of a war with the Romans in this very colonia, as it were. In the meantime, here's a nice old pub for you. The Marquis of Granby from 1520. It's said to be the oldest pub in Colchester. Just Saturday night because there's some punters outside, of course. So yeah, so the ancient city of Camulodunum became as it was marked out as a target for the Celts, and there was one particular Celt who was quite I'm just trying to think what the right word is. Was quite impactful. A Celt who wasn't too happy about the Roman invasion. I'm of course referring to Boudica, Queen Boudica of the Iceni tribe, which was a tribe which was geographically equivalent to about where Norfolk is today. And so Boudica gathered a little coalition of tribes. So there was the Iceni, and there was one or two neighbouring ones, and they gathered their forces and they marched down to Colchester, or Camulodunum, and then they laid siege to it. And this was in about the year 60 AD, by the way. And so they laid siege to it and they burnt it, and took about 10,000 or so Romans along the way in terms of the casualties. And that took place across a 2-day period. But then Boudica didn't settle there. She went south, or sorry, should I say southwest, to Londinium, a.k.a. London, of course, which, by the way, London is about 50 miles southwest of where we are now. And so then they laid siege to London, and then, for good measure, they marched up Watling Street to St Albans, or Verulamium as it was known, and then they laid siege to that as well, all in all killing tens of thousands of Romans along the way. Then, of course, the Battle of Watling Street took place, and that was the end of Queen Boudica. What happened to her is unknown, just that the rebellion was quashed by that point at about 61 AD. Now I'm just going to head to the right in just a second, because there is a very significant remnant of the Roman era. So we're just heading towards the Balkern Gate. And so the just give me a second. So anyway, in around the year 80 AD, the town was rebuilt with new defensive walls, and Colchester, it became no longer the capital of Roman Britain by that point. Then at that point, London became the capital, but nevertheless, Colchester was the first, as it were. And meanwhile, they did some repairs to the town walls, and we are approaching one such wall right now. And in fact, this is one of the oldest things you're likely to see all day. So there are a series of 6 gates leading into Colchester historically, and this is the remains of one of them. And this was, as I say, the Balkan Gate, and this was basically the grand entrance into Colchester, or exit if as it were. And so what we are looking at here is a remnants of the walls, or the gate from the 2nd century. So I'll just swing around, show from this angle. So this would have been the grand entrance to the great colonia of Camulodunum. In fact, I can show you what it might have looked like in the 1st century due to this helpful information board here. And then here's some of the old town walls as well. And then, of course, because here in Britain we like a pub, we built a pub on the remains of the walls and called it the Hole in the Wall. Because why not? But anyway, yeah, just to reiterate, this is a 2nd century Roman gate that we are walking through right now, and so, yeah, of course, the Romans abandoned Britain in the 5th century, and in their place came the Anglo-Saxons, who settled in around about the 6th century, and they formed a number of kingdoms. In this case, they formed the kingdom of the East Saxons, a.k.a. Essex. And that was among a number of other kingdoms, such as Kent, such as East Anglia, which was the kingdom of the East Angles, just above there. And there was also the kingdom of the West Saxons, aka Wessex. And then there was, of course, Northumbria, right in the north. And there was also Mercia in what equates to about the West Midlands today. And so here we are in the kingdom of the East Saxons, but of course that ceded to Wessex in about the 9th century. And oh yeah, we passed a water tower there from the 19th century, if anyone's wondering. Meanwhile, we are just coming up to a church. Clanroost, I think is the pronunciation, Shaquille. Yeah, it's a lovely town, is Clanroost, if anyone's interested. that's my latest upload on this channel. Well, actually, no, I uploaded Deal a couple of hours ago. But yeah, so this, by the way, is St. Peter's Church. There's been a church there for over 900 years, but this was mostly rebuilt in the 19th and 20th centuries. We have a green man, so we'll just head on to the high street. So, okay, keep me posted if there are any signal issues or anything, anyway, yeah, so where were we? So the Saxons came here and they called this the Kingdom of the East Saxons, or Essex, and then of course the Vikings came. The great heathen army came in the 9th century and they invaded and they gained territory in the Kingdom of the Vikings came and established the Dane Law, which was a territory where there was a borderline approximately between London and Liverpool, going diagonally northwest, and yeah, so this was so the east of England was under Viking rule for a period between the 9th and the 10th centuries, but then Edward the Elder, the first son of Alfred the Great, helped to reclaim the territory back from the Vikings. And meanwhile, here's an interesting sculpture. There's no plaque or anything, I think it's just an arts installation. It does remind me of something that I saw in a few statues like this I saw in Woking, if there's any relation. But, so yeah, I'm not sure who this is or what it's signifying, but there we are. And of course, any town or city that has Chester or Castor or Cester or Etta in the suffix signifies that the Anglo-Saxons came and found an old Roman settlement and built on top of it. So, and this one happens to be the Roman fort along the River Colne in Colchester. And then of course the Normans came shortly after the conquest of 1066, and we'll see very shortly their legacy as we head towards the castle. But before we do have a couple of coaching inns to show you. So I've just gone past the town hall. I'll just swing back because it's quite tall, and there'll be some good shots if I turn around in just a second. So bear with me there. In the meantime, we have the Red Lion Hotel to talk about, and this right here in the centre of the shot, it dates back to 1485, so we're told. So which makes it sort of borderline between medieval and Tudor. And then I'll give you a proper look at the town hall, even though it's a city now. But here is Colchester Town Hall, the big tall building and the going to the centre of the shot now. So this was built between 1898 and 1902. Oh, Catherine's saying about the sculptures by Sean Henry, British sculptor. Yeah, it might have been the same one that was responsible for a few ones like that in Woking, possibly. But that's good to know. And so as I say, the town hall is, well, it's 50 metres tall, or 162 foot, if you like. And on the top, I'll just try and see if I can get a zoom of it. So on the top is a statue of St. Helena. So St. Helena, on this top here, she was a 3rd century Roman empress and was mother to Constantine the Great, who helped establish Christianity in Britain. And so she's got a great vantage point of the now city of Colchester from the top of the town hall. So that is Colchester Town Hall here on Colchester High Street in the city of Colchester. And now we have right here the George Hotel, which is over 500 years old, and I believe would have likely been a coaching inn, which is where travellers would have rested on stagecoach journeys in the era between the 17th and 19th centuries, when public transport was via horse and carriage, or stagecoach basically, and every so often they would have to take a rest for a change of horses and a bite to eat, and maybe a bed for the night as well. Saturday night, yeah, there'll be a few drunk lads in Colchester, I imagine, but we're all with that here. Yeah, so if you love your British history, then Colchester really is the place to be, because we are now approaching the castle. I think someone's broken a glass there, so typical Saturday night stuff there. Also, this restaurant's got an interesting name. It's called Al Pacino. I wonder if Al himself has been here. So now we come to the epicentre of not only Colchester but of Roman Britain in its entirety. So this is Colchester Castle, or at least the Castle Keep, and it's effectively a park which is open until 9 p.m. during these summer months, or spring/summer months. So good for another hour or two, or an hour or so. But either way, so this right here was the original site of the Temple of Claudius, and here is what it may have looked like according to this artist here. And here's what it would look like in 1150. Slug and lettuce, that's a common chain here in Britain of pubs. Yeah, so we are on the very site of what was originally the Temple of Claudius, but then of course the Normans came and they built a castle over it, because William the Conqueror quite liked the idea of building over old Roman forts. And like pretty much all of the castles back then, it was rebuilt in stone a little bit later, and it had a bit of a busy history during the 13th century. The first Barons' War took place during the reign of King John, and this was where some of the Norman landowners rebelled against King John for his refusal to abide by the Magna Carta. And there's one clause which allowed the group of 25 barons to override the king at any time by way of force. So they seized the castle in 1216, but then a 3-month siege ensued and King John reclaimed it in 1216, which was also the year of his death, when he apparently he ate too many peaches in Newark Castle. Although I'm sure that's not the whole truth, but yeah, they say he died from a surfeit of peaches. But either way, and there's some more very interesting history as marked out by this sort of obelisk monument here, and this relates to the English Civil War, which I'll explain in depth as we go into as we go east a bit. But this right here is where two royalist captains, Sir Charles Lucas and Sir George Lisle, were executed, and this was following the siege of Colchester. Again, I'll explain that as we go, but this was from 1648, and I'll just show you the inscription. So this stone marks the spot where, on August 28, 1648, after the surrender of the town, the two royalist captains, Charles Lucas and Sir George Lisle, were shot by order of Sir Thomas Fairfax, the parliamentarian general. So, as the bells strike for 8 o'clock, I can just imagine these were the final sights that they saw, those two royalist captains. But the castle was dismantled after the Civil War, although the keep remained intact. But then there was some restoration that occurred in the early 18th century, and so that explains why it's not sort of in a ruined state like a lot of other castles across England are. And there's a very pleasant garden, which I'll just give you a look into. What's also interesting is there's been various sort of rebuildings throughout the centuries, and you can almost see the outlines of where some of the battlements were around about the centre of the shot, before it was later subsequently raised higher. But yeah, so like I say, this was spared from ruin by a chap from the early 18th century, and not only to have the castle keep there, but you have these lovely gardens here. So let's have a look, shall we? whole place almost to myself. Gives you a great sense of peace. I can say that much being here in person. But yeah. So that's Colchester Castle in a nutshell, and also some, for those of you who love flowers, here are some ones I can show you. The castle must be haunted by Roman soldiers. Well, quite possibly, who knows? Yeah, they want the temple back, don't they? Well, they abandoned Britain, so they can't complain too much. Yeah, I don't know what genus or anything we're looking at, but yeah. Oh, thank you, Larry, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, like I say, Colchester is a very underrated spot for, let's say, a day trip out of London. It's out of London, so, and if you're a history buff like I am, then it has a lot going for it, I'd say. But I can, rather than me just telling you that, I'll show you, because there's more to see. And it's a nice picturesque walk out of the castle here. I can leave you here. It is a nice place. This this garden. And so anyway, yeah, a couple of things to show. Of course, it's First and Second World War memorial. Of course, lest we forget. And in the background is, well, it's a converted church. It's now the Natural History Museum. It's housed in a former church called All Saints Church, and that's another little detail there. But as we head this way, as we're heading east down the high street, and I can show you one or two very stunning old buildings. And so it'll give me a chance to explain the siege of Colchester that was mentioned earlier, when we saw the spot at which those two royalist officers were executed. So the English Civil War took place between 1642 and 1651, and it started off in sort of even territory, but then by 1645 the parliamentarians had formed their new model army, which was effectively the first professional army led by Parliament, whereas previously they'd had to use part-time militias. Now they had their kind of act together, as it were. Hello, L&M from Bari, South Italy. Hello. Buongiorno. But yeah, so in 1645, the start of the new model army, and the commander-in-chief was Sir Thomas Fairfax, who you might have seen mentioned on that obelisk thing there. Fairfax was a Yorkshireman. He was initially above Oliver Cromwell in the hierarchy, and going by his track record, he was rather, objectively speaking, he was rather brilliant at what he did. He notched up 6 wins and 0 losses. So, in terms of pure stats, he was kind of like the Royalists' worst nightmare. Meanwhile, this church that we're looking at is the Church of St James the Great. Just get it in shot there. It's built between the 13th and 15th centuries, with a bit of restoration in the 19th century. And this one still is a church, unlike the one just down the road. You work in a historical society? Oh, I didn't know that. An impressive Gates angel, he said. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so Church of St James the Great. Nice medieval church for you there. And so the Siege of Colchester took place in 1648, which was the point at which the Royalists were already, well, they must have known that the writing was kind of on the wall almost, but yeah, so it took place across an 11-week period, and it started when the Royalist army occupied Colchester, and they kept the parliamentarians out at the town walls. And by the way, this is the point at which the East Gate once stood, but it was later demolished after the Civil War. So as I say, there were 6 gates into Colchester back in those days, but not anymore. But yeah, so the Royalists were holed up here, and then Thomas Fairfax, he set up an artillery cannons outside of the town walls, and it meant that the residents were trapped inside, and they began to run out of food, and then during the final week, the news had reached Fairfax that Oliver Cromwell had scored a victory at the Battle of Preston, at which point a few days later the Royalists laid down their arms, and Fairfax went into the town and issued this message, which was quite ominous for some. He said that all officers over the rank of captain would be captured and their futures could not be guaranteed, meaning that they would be executed. However, the underrank members of the Royalist Army were released, and they were made to swear an oath never to take up arms against Parliament again. Yeah, it was a bit of a brutal encounter, and we'll actually see firsthand one such consequence of the Siege of Colchester. I'll save it for when we get there, but we're heading in that direction. But before we return to that point on the Siege of Colchester, moving on from there, the town, as it was then, it was aided by the influx of the Dutch and Flemish refugees from the Spanish Netherlands, who brought in their skills as weavers to the town, and so it meant that Colchester did quite a roaring trade in wool, and there's even a wool mill coming up, which we'll see shortly. But yeah, it's one of those trades that was that helped to build Colchester through the medieval era onwards. But then, of course, the Industrial Revolution happened with the this bus. Yes, the Industrial Revolution happened in the 18th century, and that was the point at which the towns in the north and the Midlands sort of came into their own and left places like Colchester unable to compete in the manufacturing side of things with their canals and their steam-powered mills and so forth. And again, some nice old buildings for you here. But there's one timber frame building that really takes the biscuit, or takes the cake, or whatever the right expression is. And we'll see that in just a few minutes' time. So, in the meantime, I'd say it gives me a chance to plug some of my other tours, although I don't have anything concrete planned just yet, although I'll probably be live around this time next Saturday. So keep your eyes peeled for that if that's of interest. There's a certain industrial city that I may be headed to, and so yeah, you can keep an eye for that either on the old notifications or on the calendar, for those of you who know me from heygo.com. And as I mentioned, my sister channel, there's a link in the description. That's where I'll be doing some of the more experimental tours. Experimental in the sense of the signal not being as guaranteed, if that's a word I can even use. But yeah, I mentioned it on a test stream that I did a few days back. That's on the Alex in Great Britain channel. I'll likely be doing some tours where if I come across a small town, I'll probably stream from there, and it'll be perhaps a slightly less formal walking tour. Blackpool, oh well, maybe one day. So yeah, so if that's of interest, you can always pop over to the old sister channel and hit the old notifications there if you want to. But in the meantime, we have a nice former watermill to show you. And this right here, you can see where it got its power supply from. This being the River Colne. Of course, now they've converted it to, I believe, apartments. It's a rather historical place to live in. And finally, I've teased it long enough, but we're now coming up to a very famous building, one of the most famous in Colchester itself. Just around the corner, we're approaching the old Siege House. Edinburgh and York are two places I'd love to stream from at one point, that's sure. Absolutely. So during the Siege of Colchester in 1648, this was one of the places where a little skirmish took place, and if you can see these red rings, they are where somebody has effectively highlighted the bullet holes. You can see it better from these ones here. So in this central bit of the hole of the red ring thing, there's a hole where a I'm assuming a parliamentarian or possibly a royalist bullet went through this very building, and it's quite stunning to think that that's a remnant from 1648. And Tish has found the perfect note, I see, indeed. And it's now a nice bar and brasserie, and they've even branded it with their own take of the bullet holes. So the old siege house, bar and brasserie. The building itself dates from the late 15th century in Steadley, and I believe it would have been another coaching inn back in the day. But of course, a lot of former coaching inns were simply repurposed as pubs and restaurants. So, of course, the railways came in the mid-19th century and put the whole stagecoach industry out of business almost overnight. But the pubs, the infrastructure and such are still there, and it's always a nice little clue to the past and also to the geography as well, being as we are on the road which would have linked, if people were travelling from London to, let's say, Norwich or Ipswich, then they may have stopped here at Colchester. Another couple of bullet holes here. Oh, exactly, Julie. Yeah, it's great how the whole system we have of listed buildings, so we give them protected status if there's interesting history behind them, and I love all that stuff. And on that same note, there are some other historical buildings lining this street still. Another thing I love is when every building on a street is unique. So this is quite fun to see. Just try and cross the road safely. There's a bit of a blind spot there, so I'll use this one here. And also, Colchester is quite close to one or two nice seaside towns, including one of my favourites, Walton-on-the-Naze. So if you like seaside towns, then there's a video that I did on this channel, pre-recorded one in 4K, of Walton-on-the-Naze. And yeah, among other places as well. This is quite a fascinating part of the country here in the east of England. And we're not too far from Ipswich either, which is somewhere I've still never been able to do a tour from, and I'll have to get onto that at one point, because Ipswich is a great underrated town in Suffolk. So in the meantime, I've got a few more nice buildings to savour before we call it a day for this tour. Oh, the level crossing is just going down. There'll be a train coming past any moment now. But I'm kind of more interested in the view behind me, so I'm going to swing around this way. Oh, Cornwall, yeah, I'd absolutely love to go to Cornwall. I will do at some point. In fact, I'll be thrilled to go to Cornwall once I can sort out the logistics and so forth. In the meantime, here's some nice closing shots of Colchester for you as we call time on this particular walking tour. I hope it's been of some interest, and yeah, just to say that, so thank you so much for coming out here. It's been an absolute pleasure as usual. And if around next week, look out for another tour that I'll be doing, in all likelihood, and in subsequent weeks as well. And if the sister channel interests you, there'll be a link to that as well, I believe, in the description. So maybe some more live tours exclusive to that channel as well. And yeah, and thanks for all the kind words and for the donations. That is super kind. And I'll just give you a closing shot of these great timber frame buildings. And so yeah, so until we see each other again, I wish you a very, very pleasant Saturday, whether it's morning, afternoon or evening for you. Could even be Sunday. And Catherine, yeah, Devon is nice. Yeah, absolutely. I'll get round to Brixham at some point, I think. But one place at a time there, that's the only thing. Oh, thanks, Larry. Yeah, I appreciate you letting me know. It's like I say, I can't see from mine, so that helps. And all right, so I shall say take care, and I wish you all the very best, and it is goodbye from me here in Colchester.